Independence Day. We've got company, and they're getting ugly. Massive, nasty aliens. Bursting skulls reveal their secret power. Now they plan to pound Earth's heroes with awesome tentacle attack. Time for the big payback. Levinson jams the radar, and Whitmore delivers the final blow. ID4, get off our planet. Independence Day action figures, each with computer mission disc. Figures sold separately.
Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are celebrating our nation's independence. And what better way to celebrate our nation's independence than by doing a double review of ID4 and ID Resurgence. Now, Lee and I, we were both 9 or 10 years old around the time that the first Independence Day movie came out. And I gotta say, that movie kind of captured everyone's imaginations, because yes, it was totally bad, but at the same time, it was one of those movies that you thought was one of the coolest things you ever saw as an elementary school kid. And now 20 something years later, we get its sequel, Resurgence, where now as adults we kind of have to, do you even scratch your head at this or what? Because it's just a huge mess that Roland Emmerich thought sounded good in his head, but when it actually materialized on screen, it was like the equivalent of a Jackson Pollock painting. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know down in the comments below what you think of ID4 and ID Resurgence, and if you had any good memories. And let's go ahead and dive in. Lee, why don't you go ahead and take us in with Independence Day and Independence Day Resurgence?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I agree. So Independence Day came out 96, right? So I would have been 7. I know you're a little bit older than me, so I don't need to add any more years. So I guess anyone that wants to do some math can figure out our ages. But yeah, I mean, Independence Day, right? The first one, I have a soft spot for, right? And I think some of that is just because of, like you pointed out, it was, you watch it as a kid, it's this big bombastic action film. And it's kind of that, kind of like disaster porn that I think got really prevalent. Like, you kind of see a lot of those type of disaster films, kind of in that time frame.
Yeah, because around the mid to late 90s, that's when you start seeing all these, disaster movies like Deep Impact and Armageddon and Independence
Then you got
Day.
like Day After Tomorrow, which I want to say is like maybe 2001. I don't remember. I don't recall when that one came out, but
we still would have been in school around that time.
Yeah. Oh, that was 2004. But yeah, like in that time frame, there was a lot of these types of films that I think got a whole lot of prevalence, and I think some of them, work well for what they were. And I would say Independence Day was, I think, a good example of one that worked for the most part. And I'm going to just state it like that because, what I appreciate with the first one was, like, they just throw the aliens at you immediately.
Yeah.
There's not really a whole lot of buildup. It's just kind of like, we're here and there's some weird beeping thing that I guess is supposed to be like some type of communication. And we pretty know that aliens are here, right? And I like that. They just didn't really, there was not a whole lot of fluff. They're just like, look, aliens are coming. We just have to deal with it. And I think they kind of do a good job of gradually introducing them. They kind of like, oh, they're here. They're at the moon. Now we have, this big alien ship and then, a bunch of little alien ships dispersed from it. So I'm like, okay, cool. They kind of do a good job of building up the suspense of it. And I think what I enjoyed about that was it kind of really builds the tension, right? So, David, who's played by Jeff Goldblum, he kind of finds this code within our satellites that pretty much is like a ticking timer for what's going to happen, which is this big old destruction. And, I kind of enjoyed kind of the build up to that. And I will say this, and I think this is what I liked so much more about the first one than the second one was, we have this big old like attack, right? And of course the aliens, they like to attack all these major monuments. So I won't get into that because why do they know to attack these places? Who knows? But they do this, and it looks really good, and it still looks good today. And
It's
I
very
think
it's very iconic too.
yes,
When you think about
absolutely,
it.
right? Like, I think people remember, the White House exploding or the Chrysler Building exploding. Like, there are moments that are like that, and it's done with fantastic miniature work. And I think I saw somewhere that there was more miniature work used in this film than any film ever. And honestly, with how much more prevalent that CGI and everything is today, that's probably a record that will never be beaten. And I think because they chose to do it like that, it just ages better because the effects just look good. Now, of course, there's times where, yeah, it doesn't look very real. You could tell it's a miniature, but for the most part, at least for myself, it works. So that's what I liked about, kind of like, all the bombastic stuff. I think it just looks really good. I give huge props to all those teams that are part of that process because that must have been quite a challenge to do all that type of work. So I give them total props for that. And I think where it starts to get weird for me is the Area 51 sequence, right? I think this is where things start to get a little bit kind of like weirder for me. So, we have the aliens, Will Smith's character. I don't even remember his name.
I think it's Hiller.
Yeah, sure. Captain Hiller. Yeah, that's right. Because his kid's also, in the second one. But, he ends up there's this kind of like, altercation, and pretty much, the fighter pilots all pretty much get taken out. But Will Smith managed to take out one of the aliens and brings him to Area 51. And this is just where things to me kind of get bizarre, right? Like, I know it's an alien movie, so you shouldn't put a whole lot of stock into kind of the story, but why would the Secretary of Defense never bring up the fact that we have these aliens already? That to me was just like, why would he never bring it up? Why this is not something that gets discussed? I feel like if we're literally at combat with freaking aliens, I think if you knew anything that would have been beneficial, you would bring it up. So I don't know. Where did the movie start to kind of fall apart for you?
I mean, to be fair, like the movie kind of fell apart once we started seeing Captain Hiller and in his, what would you call her, girlfriend or fiance, kind of just like smooching up. Because I'm like, look, it's an alien movie, or alien invasion movie, right? I don't really care about the personal lives of all these people. I just want to see some aliens attacking people. Um, and that might seem a bit harsh, but I'm the sort of person where it's like, just keep the story simple. All right, you don't need to pile on about all these personal, things going on, between the characters, right? Because because these disaster movies, they're not really, what's the best way of phrasing it? They're not really well adept at telling, dramatic interpersonal stories, right? They're good at one thing and one thing only. It's just telling a story about the Earth, either getting destroyed or nearly getting destroyed, and fancy explosions, just to make things a bit more interesting, really.
Yeah, absolutely fair. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the characters, right? Because I think that's a fantastic point, and I think it's worth noting, right? So, we kind of have a lot of these story threads that feel totally too much for the type of film that you're in, right?
They just take you out of the element,
Yeah.
because I mean, like, because we're just starting to get into the fact that the White House is trying to formulate a plan on, oh shit, these aliens are like hovering over our cities. We got to figure out what to do here. And then it cuts to L.A. where Will Smith makes a joke about, oh, all these people are moving out because they can't handle one earthquake. I'm like, what? I'm like, come on, man. I was just about to get into this, dude. Like,
Yeah,
why?
There definitely is parts that I think kind of just don't really flow well, right? And I think all the story threads just kind of being all over the place and kind of interconnecting throughout is just
And they don't go anywhere either. That's another thing too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they do go somewhere. It's just not really, I think, totally warranted or needed for the type of movie we're in, because you have like, right, we got President, right, Bill Pullman. So you kind of have his storyline where, like, he's the president and he's trying to manage his presidency, and he's trying to manage the alien threat. His wife is constantly in danger, and he's always wondering about her, and there's kind of this, very, I'm not going to say touching because we don't know what type of relationship he really had with his wife. But I guess the scene where she dies, but like you have all that going on. Then you have David, right, played by Jeff Goldblum, and his storyline with his father, Judd Hirsch, who, they're just kind of bantering back and forth. And then you have for David, like he's trying to get back with his ex-wife, who happens to be the president's aide, and we find out that they actually had like a friendship back in the day. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a lot. And then to your point, then it's like, oh, well, now we have Will Smith. We have him who's trying to join NASA, and his relationship with Vivica A. Fox, who's an exotic dancer. So
not a stripper, an exotic dancer, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, though she's an exotic dancer, that's what she says in the film. So we have them and like Will Smith debating upon whether or not he wants to marry her and everything going on there. And then to me, the one that absolutely drove me crazy is what the hell is Randy Quaid doing in this movie?
Yeah, because he plays some drunk crop duster who can't keep his shit together. Which, by the way, I'm wondering because I know because I obviously you would get in a lot of trouble with the law if you were drinking and driving. Has nobody ever stopped this guy and said, "Hey, you look a little bit tipsy. Should you really be getting into that crop dusting plane?"
Yeah, I have no idea how.
It's a miracle he hasn't. Honestly, it's a miracle he hasn't crashed and burned because the one mess up that we see him make in the entire film is that I think he was supposed to like crop dust someone's field across town, and he crop dusted someone else's field instead.
Mm-hmm.
And he stumbles out of the plane and he just takes a swig, and I'm like, okay, apparently you can drink and fly, but you can't drink and drive. So so sue me.
Yeah. Look, I have no idea. I don't know how that works. I mean, obviously, I feel I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like that's probably illegal. But I mean, like his storyline to me was so totally unneeded. Now, first of all, I want to say, knowing how crazy Randy Quaid is now, I actually think he was trying to be more normal by just being an alcoholic.
Right.
I guess for his acting range that he was able to kind of get out of his normal craziness to just be a raging alcoholic. And then like there's kind of this like weird storyline with him trying to show like he could be a good father, which was totally not needed. And then the other thing that totally was bizarre to me was supposedly he got abducted by aliens, which I mean, I guess knowing that aliens are attacking us, maybe those were the aliens, but they never actually like say whether or not it was real.
Right.
And I'm like, why have him be some crazy guy that is, spouting about aliens abducting him? You introduce aliens, but then you never actually prove to us that the aliens abducted him.
Well, not to mention too, you also have to add in the obligatory, conflict with the kids because the kids they can't, stand him being an alcoholic pilot, and
of course.
Because why not?
Yeah, it's just I find it so it's just so insufferable that like I mean out of all these like plots, right? You got the president's plot, you got Jeff Goldblum's plot, you got Will Smith's plot, you got Randy Quaid's plot. I'm like, you have to like cut some of this stuff out, right? It's a 2.5 hour long film. I think that you could have just totally got rid of Randy Quaid and the film would have been fine.
Right.
It totally was just not needed. So all that stuff, just get rid of it, be done with it, because we don't need all that nonsense. But here we are talking about Randy Quaid. And actually, I have a very fun anecdote I will save for the end when we talk about the finale, because I don't know if you know about this, but it'll be fun to share.
Okay, gotcha.
But yes, we have all these just like crazy plot threads going on. And like I said, it kind of culminates with, we got, the aliens, they bring them to Area 51, which I guess the Secretary of Defense magically knew about it, but nobody else, including the president, didn't know about this and, failed to kind of acknowledge or talk about anything. And then this is, to me, where things just fall into the absurd. So, we have this, aliens had destroyed all these places. And I like how Will Smith's fiance, or not girlfriend, right? Because they're not married or anything yet. So Will Smith's girlfriend it survives the blast, and then Will Smith somehow he takes a helicopter and somehow finds them in the middle of nowhere. Like, and the whole time I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm kind of worried there. Like, maybe Vivica A. Fox was somehow lowjacked or something. Like, so this way Will Smith never lost sight of her. Like, I don't know. Did you notice that? Was it like as weird to you when he just like magically found her out in the middle of nowhere?
He's a very, very good pilot, man. It's a shame. It's a shame that NASA didn't pick him up because he would have been really, really good at finding those aliens. You know?
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, we're talking about finding. I mean, a needle in the haystack is not even, I think, a good enough compliment to how he was able to find his girlfriend there with everything going on. So,
I mean, not to mention too that half of LA is like literally a scrap heap. So
yeah, I mean, geez, not even half. I mean, like 95% of it is literally nothing. So
yeah, exactly.
But hey, we just magically find the girlfriend, and then we're kind of at this point where it's just like, oh, we're totally defeated, and then David is like, oh, we should give the aliens a computer virus. And like, look, I get it. Like, it's 96. We're not as maybe technologically savvy.
I mean, because the internet was in its infancy at that time, so
yes,
it's like back then it probably would have been like, oh, a computer virus, how novel,
I know. Yeah,
God,
I know, right?
God, we're so old.
It's like, oh yeah, like this is great. Like we're gonna get in front of all this technology stuff, and they're just like, yeah, we're just gonna create a computer virus, which nowadays it'd just be like,
it's like common sense.
Like, yeah, it totally is implausible to have it work. I mean, I guess you could say like, oh, maybe they have the alien technology, maybe they'll figure something out. I don't know, but looking back at it, was probably not the greatest thing to kind of hang your hat on as far as your ultimate conclusion. So you have the hat, and it's like, okay, well, now we need to somehow implant this computer virus. And the writing team was like, okay, well, why don't we just have Will Smith's character? He's going to take the bomb up to the alien spaceship using this 40-year-old plus alien ship that was left behind previously. And it's just like, okay, like, no, like this is like getting more and more ridiculous by the minute.
I was gonna say, do you want to know what's even more ridiculous is the fact that Will Smith volunteers to go, and he's like, I've seen them in operation, I know how they work. I'm like, really? So you actually got into their little ship and figured it all out, did you?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Okay. I mean, this is news to me.
Yeah, I don't think seeing how they operate, like from the outside, right? Like be able to see how they maneuver and stuff. I don't think that means you know how to actually pilot it.
Well, Lee, you know what this means, right? Because we've seen people operate forklifts all the time, right? So by that logic, you and I should be able to operate a forklift like that, or even a dump truck, or even an airplane, because how many times have we watched movies like Top Gun? I mean, we're very observant people. I think you and I could very easily fly an F-16,
Yeah, I agree, man. All you gotta do is just press the buttons and then we'll get going with it. I mean,
just like wiggle the joystick around. How hard can it be?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because, I mean, that's what pretty much happens in the film, right? So our final counterattack has a bunch of random pilots that have varying levels of experience. They're just like, hey, if you're a pilot and you have experience, we're going to show you in a few hours how to operate these planes and shoot missiles.
I just love how I just love that scene because it just reeks of desperation. Because I'm like, at some point, someone must have been like, "Ah, fuck this. We'll just like have everybody get in the airplane because we're over budget and we got to get this done. I mean, fuck it.
Yeah, they're just like, whatever. Like, this is it. We're just gonna have people. You're just gonna learn how to fly. It's fine. We'll just move on. Like, we're just gonna help train you to get it done. And that's pretty much what happens, right? So you got Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum, right? They end up going into the ship. They fire off their virus bomb, which I guess is what I'll call it. So it causes the mothership to be disabled, and it causes all the little ships below to also become, well, not disabled, but it brings down their shields, which is what ultimately we need to destroy these aliens. So you kind of do that, and then you have like all this ridiculous thing going on, and it feels like, you know, we're not doing enough damage, right? So even with the shields down, we're like, oh yeah, we're finally gonna get them, but we come to the conclusion that, oh, this is not working. So the first thing that popped into my head was, earlier in the film, you used nukes. Why did you not feel like that was a good plan B now?
Right.
Like, you show that you had nukes, you wanted to use them before, and it was just like, okay, that didn't work. And then now we're like, huh, what do we do to destroy them or do a lot of damage? And no one was like, why don't we use those nukes that we used last time? And I guess
you're forgetting they used up all their nuclear weapons in that first go, so they had none left.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we had one that we utilized, and that was it. We depleted our supply. Nothing for us to do. So
I mean, if they're that desperate that the president himself, you know, should get into the pilot seat and fly, then yeah,
yes.
I mean, they're desperate enough to have pull of all their nuclear eggs into one missile.
That's true. How can I forget that? Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to add that other ridiculous bit where the president gets into a plane. I mean, granted, he is at least a previous pilot, and we know he has experience. But you know, it is what it is. But then, you know, we're kind of at the stage where it looks like we're all not going to make it. But Randy Quaid shows up and had his moment to shine. Where unfortunately, though, Randy Quaid has a missile, but he's not able to use it. So he sacrifices himself in order to destroy the ship. And I like how once the ship goes down, they're all like, oh, well, now that we know how to bring down the ships, we need to tell everybody else how to do it. And I'm like, what exactly are you gonna tell these other people? Like, hey, you need to strap bombs to somebody, and they need to like just kind of go up into the aliens, like whatever, like big gun that pops out the bottom to destroy it.
That's a one-way mission right there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I guess that's what they're gonna be like. Hey, we just need to have a whole bunch of kamikazes going there. That's how you kill it. So, but hey, that's how the movie ends. And then, you know, we have all these nice plot threads that come together and everyone's happy, where we got, you know, we got Jeff Goldblum's character that seems to rekindle his relationship with the president's aide, which gets lost in the next film, but we'll talk about that in a moment. We have Will Smith and Vivica Fox. They're all happily together now. And you know, it looks like the day is saved. So but yeah, that was just the craziness that was the original Independence Day. And it's, like I said, to me, I was totally fine with it. Like, you know, I like the really the first two acts, I think, really stick out to me.
Yeah.
You know, I like kind of the introduction to aliens. I like how, you know, we don't know a lot about them. They kind of slowly start to kind of be a part of the plot. We get to finally like kind of see one in the flesh, so to speak. And I think the buildup was good, even though, like you point out from the beginning, there's just a little bit too much with all the characters jumping back and forth. But after the Area 51 thing, I think everything just become totally implausible. So
I mean, you kind of get the feeling at that point the writers were like, you know, there's nothing else we can add to it. Let's just try to, you know, make it as easy as possible and cash our checks, you know.
So you're gonna say that, and I want you to hold on to that thought, but please continue. I want you to hold on to that thought, though.
Well, I mean, that was pretty much it.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let me say this, right? So there was actually, right, the original ending of this, and I want to see, have you ever heard of a different ending that was proposed for this film? Before I get into it,
I have not, honestly.
Okay,
no.
cool. All right, so this is actually what the original end was, right? And I want to say, right, that they took this out because they thought it lacked believability and drama. So I want you to keep that into your head as we just sat here. We ranted about how crazy the last act was, right?
So before we go in, do we know if it was Roland Emmerich who kind of, you know, made this push for the change, or it was the studio heads, or what?
That's actually a good question. I don't know. I think it was, I want to say it was maybe the studio stepped in to like be like, hey, this doesn't make sense. Because I believe that what was originally in the script was definitely Emmerich's idea, right?
Okay.
Or the writing team or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So originally, what was going to happen was, so Randy Quaid's character Russell, right? He was actually supposed to be denied to be able to join the planes because he was drinking all the time, right?
Mhm.
So initially that was supposed to happen. So what was in the original cut of the film was he was supposed to strap a bomb onto his crop duster and fly it into the spaceship to destroy it. That was the
Wow.
original one.
Okay.
I could not believe when I read that because it totally took me back because I'm like, you know what? Like, this movie is all over the place. You have all these ridiculous things happening, but you feel like that was the thing that was a step too far. I don't know. I think that would have been the perfect conclusion to that. Is just to see him on his crop duster with a giant bomb strapped to its wing and
Right.
just driving into it. Right. That would have been great to me.
I sort of like imagine it like in the seat behind him, just tucked away while he's flying into the alien ship.
I actually like to think about it like it just kind of like strapped overhead, like on the wings, and it's just kind of like you have this giant bomb just sticking out in front as it's just strapped to the roof.
Could you imagine what the dialogue would have been like? They're like, "What the hell is that guy doing?" And
Be
like,
like, okay, guys, it looks like this is our solution. There's the crazy kind of crop duster that's doing it. Let's all just,
I mean,
let's drive a path for him. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that just would have been great.
It's kind of it's that proverbial the pot calling the kettle black. Really,
yeah, yes,
that's what it is, because it's like
yes.
it couldn't have been. I mean, the movie is already insane as it is, and then for them to say, we're not going to do a bomb strapped to a crop duster, it's too crazy. That's like, I'm like, that's really rich of you to say that.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, that's the part that was too much. Like, we have aliens that have these like, I don't know, really weird looking like suits on the outside, and you open them up, we got the alien on the inside. We have computer viruses that we're using to destroy them. They have like a super faulty thing like the Death Star, which is just like, oh, well, this is how we destroy it. We just gotta, kind of like just blow something up on its giant gun when it's about to use it. So it's got this weird fault in it. And then, but no, a bomb on a crop duster, that's where we draw the line. So, but yeah, that was how I wanted to share that with you, because I thought that was a great thing. To this day, I'm definitely one of those is like, release the crop dust and cut. Like, that's what I want to see.
Did they actually film it, or did they like cut it out during pre-production?
So I wasn't able to really locate anything about it. So I don't know if anything was filmed about it.
Because I'm thinking, because with the way you're describing it, it kind of sounds like what might have happened was they presented the script to the execs and said, "This is what's going to happen in acts, 1, 2, and 3," and then someone must have piped up and said, "Hey, we looked over everything for Act 3, and we want you to cut this out and rewrite it as this."
Yes, that's entirely possible. I wish there was. I wasn't able to locate anything. I definitely wished there's a little bit more I could have found. There probably is, but I have no research skills, so it just didn't happen. But that's how it kind of ended. And I definitely would be interested. I guess we'll have to see if there's maybe anything about it afterwards. But
yeah, let us know down in the comments below if you know anything about this, about the original ending for the movie. We'd love to hear from you about that, because now I'm curious.
Yes, tell us about how the crop duster would have been a part of it. Definitely, if there's any actual visuals of it, because that'd be good. But yeah, that was it. And like I said, I think for the movie, yes, it's totally bogged down. All the story beats are just ridiculous when it comes to the characters. They try to do too much. There's just way too many characters that you're trying to pile into what's ultimately an alien disaster film, right? So this isn't, I think the best way to use your 2.5 hours is to go through all this. But I will say this, I think the pieces when they work, right? I think the first act and a half, 2 acts were fine movies, right? I think as far as what you're looking for. I think the special effects really hold up now. Some of it definitely looks cheesy. I don't want to pretend like it's perfect. All we need to do is talk about, Boomer the dog as he's running through the tunnel with all these explosions literally going around.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, I mean, yes, like some of it doesn't really add up very well. But,
but it was the 90s, though. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like I said, it's fine. And, obviously we had a dog in the second one, too, because it was in the first one, had to be in the second one. But like I said, luckily Boomer did survive for all those people that were worried about Boomer the dog. But and I think, like I said, all the technical stuff, especially with the miniature work, is just really, really good. And I think that's why I could watch this, even though it's almost 30 years old now. So I could sit here and watch it and be like, you know what, this can still be enjoyable if it's not totally bizarre. But as I said, the last act definitely just kind of got into craziness. I get that the virus plot was probably more sensible back in '96, but now looking back at it, it just is totally stupid. And all the things just kind of working magically, and having all these character threads all just kind of came together, felt super sappy. But it is what it is. I would give it 3.2 out of 5. It's a a totally fine, serviceable film, as long as you can turn your brain off for the last act.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those movies where it's like, if you try not to think too hard about it, you'll actually enjoy it.
Yes.
I mean, for me, I'll give it a 3 out of 5 just because I'm very nostalgic about this movie. It's one of those movies that that you go and see, and then the next day you act it out with your friends and in the neighborhood, because it's just one of those movies that kind of gets you riled up and you just get all excited about it. I remember as a kid just seeing those commercials on TV about get the new ID4 ship from McDonald's now with your Happy Meal. So for me, as much as I want to sit back and say, well, that's dumb, and that's dumb, I at the same time, I'm like, this did play a huge, well, not a huge role, but a big role in my childhood. So it's one of those movies where I can be a bit more forgiving in spite of the fact that it's campy, in spite of the fact that it's cheesy. It's just one of those movies where at the end of the day, it just makes you feel good, right? It's almost like comfort food if you think about it, or it's something to kind of fall back on when you just want to just not think about things. Now its sequel, Independence Day Resurgence, that for me came out of nowhere, because when I heard about it, I was like, they did what? So
I thought it was a joke.
I know, because at first I thought, they really didn't need to make it, right? I mean, the way that the original ended, it was like they could have just left it there, and rode off into the sunset, and that would have been it. But no, Roland Emmerich decided, 20 something years later, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and do a follow-up sequel and try to make it even bigger and better now that we have CGI effects. So Lee, why don't you go ahead and take us into this literal disaster of a movie, Independence Day Resurgence.
I think that's fair. It's fair to describe it like that, because I thought that this was really a disaster. And it's funny, right? Because, we look at it, and you brought up the fact like, oh, cool, we got all this CGI now that can make it look good. But honestly, it just made it look bad to me.
I mean, you can tell, in certain scenes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like there were, like I said, there were a few cool scenes, right? I don't want to totally take out of it. There's definitely a ton of really good work went into creating this stuff, but it just doesn't have the same punch as the original one, right? I think the original one, no matter what you say, right, it feels very real with what's happening.
I mean, the original one was original, if you think about it.
Exactly, right? We got this, we had these designs. I mean, that scene in the original one where, the alien wakes up and, hijacks Data, right? And didn't kill him, which I think we'll bring up in this one, right? Because they definitely imply he's dead in the first one.
Exactly.
But I guess just rendered him unconscious. But like that scene was actually creepy, right? In the first one, like it was just like, oh my gosh, like he's got the little tentacles wrapped around him, and it feels like it was all very real, right? Like that there's some type of animatronic, or they got something going on there, and they're utilizing it, and it feels creepy. In this one, the exact opposite, because like everything just feels so fake. Even kind of the opening, it's just like, why? Like it just starts off with CGI nonsense. I like how at the very beginning, right, there's this speech by the president, and she's sitting there talking about like, oh yeah, well, ever since this attack, we've had 20 years of no armed conflict. Nations have put aside their petty differences for the betterment of the world. And I'm like, oh, this is satire now. Like, I get it. Like, it's totally bullshit. Like, like, I like how you literally were talking about how you want to take out ridiculous things in the original one, and you open up with this premise that, all the nations just all like, we just put aside all of our differences to be okay with each other. And I'm just like, no, like, that's stupid. And then it pretty much plays beat for beat what happened in the first one happens in this one. Except for there's good aliens as well, that I guess was about the only thing that's different in the story. And they bring back some of the old characters, but then they totally don't for others, and I found that super distracting.
I mean, obviously the big one's going to be a certain Will Smith.
Yes, right. And I mean, like, look, I get it, right? Like, I'm sure, back then Will Smith wasn't as big of a name. Now, much bigger, probably didn't want to be tied to quite I would say a project that's there to be a money grab as far as anything else. But like, they have his son a part of it now, right? Who's played by A-Train, right? Which I didn't remember when I watched the first time, or it didn't dawn upon me until I rewatched it. I'm like, oh, that's A-Train.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So he's, the son is all grown up. And I like how, for Will Smith's character, like, what can we do with it? Oh, he died during like some flight testing. And I'm like, ugh, like that's not fun. Like, he was one of our main characters in the first one. And like, yeah, you probably don't want to like bring him back or something, but why do it like that? Like, I mean, it's been 20 years. Like, you could have put in somebody else. Like, it might have been like, oh, that's not Will Smith, but at least I could accept that a lot more than, bringing, his kid up to date. And it's just like, no, Will Smith died, and he didn't even die doing something. It was just flight testing stuff. Right. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So that's how we kill off one of the characters. And then Vivica Fox shows back up in this, and she's there for maybe a minute.
And but remember, she's no longer an exotic dancer. She's now a doctor.
Yes, absolutely. Because, in the first one, it was kind of brought up, and, she didn't have any issues with her career. Like, she even tells the first lady in the first one, like, you know what? Hey, it's good money, and that's what I care about. And I'm like, okay, you know what? That's fine, right? Like, it's a profession that she gets what she needs to out of it, right? Not
they're being real and honest about it. Yeah,
like, that's just the reality, right? And then, I think like people talk about like, oh yeah, I stripped for med school, I stripped to be a lawyer or something, and they're like, yeah, that's what we're gonna have her do. So now she's just kind of like some type of doctor, right? I don't know if she ever got a title, but she's now a doctor, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So was it really necessary? And the fact that she's only on screen for a minute makes it totally pointless, because then A-Train shows up and watches her die. And I'm like, okay, so this was totally pointless. So you brought in A-Train. His dad is out of the picture from the first one, right? Will Smith's not in it. His mom dies within a minute. So I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of useless now to have in the story.
It's the first of many deaths to occur in this movie, by the way.
Yes,
so
yeah, exactly. Because then we got Bill Pullman, right? So they bring back Bill Pullman, right? Who's now he's like kind of decrepit. People think that he's a little bit off his rocker, but we find out that actually he's able to kind of see the alien stuff because he's
linked to the hive mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because he's linked to them just like some of the other characters. And they bring him in, and like he's like old and decrepit now, and once again, when they're needing to have someone step up to attack the aliens. They're like, okay, cool. We're gonna have him once again. He's to be a fighter pilot, and this time he's going to do the Randy Quaid sacrifice to hurt the Queen, right? So that's his story thread. So we got the president for the first one, who was a super cool guy. He had his big speech in the first one, and he kind of had another speech in the second one. But he's just kind of like, we're just gonna bring our ticking time bomb in there, and we're just gonna blow things up.
Well, also keep in mind too, like he also acted a little bit like Randy Quaid's character throughout the movie.
Yes, he definitely feels very much off his rocker. And then we got the and two, right? So he also like in the first one, right? We had the very iconic scene where the alien takes control of Data. So now in this one, right, it takes control of the ex-president, excuse me. So that also is just another like rehash of something that we saw in the first one. But yeah, it's just kind of like replaying those same beats. Let's see here, who else we got here? Oh yeah, we got Jeff Goldblum. And we have this whatever relationship we have with Judd Hirsch in this one, where they seem to be kind of estranged. In the first one, there's kind of this, so for Jeff Goldblum, right? So we, have his character, and he's kind of seems to be in this, seems like him and his father seem to be a little bit distant now. So you kind of have this rehash of the story, but in the original one, we kind of had this nice moment where Jeff Goldblum kind of rekindles the relationship, right, with the president's aide, right?
Uh-huh.
So that was kind of this nice little story that's happening. In this one, there's just some new girl in it. Like, she's barely in it. Like, there's just a few hints that maybe they were together in some extent in the past. Now it's just like, whatever. Like, I don't even know if they do you remember if they even brought up what happened with him and his last relationship with the president's aide? I feel like they didn't even discuss it.
I think they might have killed her off.
Oh, gee, did they really?
I think so.
Damn brutal. All right. Well, yeah, so I guess, we just have that going on, and, kind of just not really needed. I like how, talk about, like, ridiculous things. So Judd Hirsch, right, he survives all this banana stuff that's happening around him, and he ends up meeting up with these, like, young group of kids, and eventually he's driving a bus to Area 51 at the end of this film. And I just like, what are we doing? Like, is this for real? Like, you talk about how you wanted the first one to kind of at least have some semblance of believability. And I feel like you threw this out the window to have whatever you have going on with this one, where now you have like Judd Hirsch is going through the salt flats with the giant alien queen chasing after him, and he's driving around in a bus. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I watching? I could not, my brain just was totally off at that stage. I'm just like, nope. Like it went to total shutdown mode because I couldn't digest what I was watching on the screen.
Because because that in itself was a rehash from from the first movie too, where where you have Randy Quaid just driving around in that trailer with his kids.
True.
Except this time it's a school bus.
Yep, that's true. That is very true. So yeah, just once again another kind of like rehash with everything. I was gonna say what's
so weird is the fact that you would think that for a movie that's supposed to be a sequel to the first Independence Day movie, you think they would want to put some emphasis on on Will Smith's kid, son, A-Train or Killer Jr. or whatever, but you really don't see that much of him. Really.
No. Yeah, he's very much, he's a part of like the new group of pilots that we have, right? So we got William Hemsworth's character that is kind of I guess the pilot. He has some type of falling out with A-Train because they were doing some testing, and because of his actions he ended up almost killing him. You have I guess Liam Hemsworth has got like his little buddy there, kind of like in the first one where Will Smith had that guy that was constantly like the comic relief. This is kind of similar with this. And then they also have, I believe she was Chinese, right?
Yeah, she was Chinese.
So, because we have to put that in because I'm sure they got some money from China, so you might as well throw in a Chinese actress. But I mean, she totally was fine for what she had to do. But like I said, definitely felt superfluous to all the other plot points. And then, let's not forget Data, right? So Data has been unconscious for 20 years. And I like how, like, literally...
And he's gay also,
Yes, right. Yeah. So what didn't really come up at all in the first one, but yes, like he, the boyfriend shows up, and I like how the boyfriend's like, "Oh yeah, I can't believe it's been 20 years since you've been unconscious." I'm like, is this real dialogue? Like, come on. Like, there's like exposition, and then there's like literally spelling out what's happening. And that drove me insane throughout the film. Like, they always do that. Like, there was nothing organic about how a lot of this stuff was presented to us. Like, we find out Will Smith is dead because like a reporter's like, "Oh, how does it feel like, leaving a plane that was named after your dad who died in an accident?" And I'm like, why would a reporter ever ask that to someone? Like, that's just the most like dick thing to ask. Like, hey, this is a really big moment. Let's talk about how this is the place that's named after your dad that died, so we could just rekindle those memories before you go on this big mission. I'm like, come on, what is this nonsense? And they do that throughout, and it's pretty much just a rehash of the first one. The only thing that was different, right, was you have these good aliens, right? So these good aliens show up. We, as human beings, we attack them first because we kind of are the shoot first, ask questions later. So we attack these good aliens as they show up. Find out that they've been in a 1,000-year plus quarrel with these aliens. They somehow have the technology to defeat them, but they somehow were defeated.
Well, not to mention too, they're disembodied now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point, right? They don't have physical bodies, right? So how they die, no idea. I have no idea. I don't know how you kill something that doesn't physically have a body. I could just feel like you might as well just exist in the internet to me, right? Like that's all it is.
A ghost in the machine, as it were.
Yes, or in this case, a machine. So, these aliens who don't have bodies. They pretty much have the means of destroying them, yet somehow didn't through this really long, drawn-out war that they had with the bad aliens. What about? No idea. It just is what it is. The movie just didn't care to really explain it. They're just like, we just need something to move the plot along.
Well, we do find out. Well, we do find out that the aliens who invaded Earth are called harvesters. So we do get something new.
Yeah, that is true. We did find out about that. So excellent call out. We do find a little bit about them. So
another thing too, because you remember later on in the movie that little white ball mentions that there's like a refugee planet or something.
Yes. Yep.
And that the harvesters can't get a hold of that little white ball, because if they do, they'll be able to access the coordinates.
Yep.
And my thing is like, so just about anybody can access it. They just touch you and you just give the information away. Like, you don't differentiate between who's good or who's bad. Okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah. Can you not just like delete the data? Like, I don't like this is the problem when you have like a weird sentient alien being that we don't really have any idea of how they exist. So it's just like, I don't know, like what happens. Like, not just explode? Like, I don't know. I don't know the rules for you.
Your iPhone is smarter than that little alien ball, right? I mean, there's no way anybody's going to be able to access your data unless they know your 4-digit PIN. But apparently, Brent Spiner, all he has to do is just touch the little ball, and it just reveals like all the information about interstellar weaponry and travel and all that shit.
Yes. So, but yeah, so I guess in this random, like, we've just been all over the place with this one, but there's just not really anything to talk about as far as a cohesive story goes. It's just, hey, look, there's aliens. They showed up again. They attacked again. We have a lot of characters from the first one. Some of them make it, some of them don't. And in our lovely climax, the giant queen comes out. She's but she gets killed before she gets control of the other good aliens white ball thing. And that's the end of it. And then they kind of tease like, oh, cool, we could take the fight to them now. As I definitely got the feeling they were trying to tease something in the future. I don't know if you got that vibe from it, but I definitely felt like they were trying to wink at us like, hey, we might be able to do more of this stuff.
Oh God, please no.
But
Please.
I guess I think the generally poor reception probably stopped any attempts that may or may not have happened. But
well, who's to say Roland Emmerich doesn't sit down with Netflix or Hulu or Disney and they decide to do like a limited series?
Yep.
Kind of prolong the torture, as it were.
Yeah, what was weird, right? So this whole movie was like a total joke. The only thing that kind of got me, and I'm just gonna go ahead and admit this, I was kind of bummed out that they killed Data's boyfriend. I'm just gonna say that, like it was the only thing that I actually felt like had any emotion involved with it.
But it was also so random too. Like that was the most random thing that could happen.
It is totally random. Like it's all out of left field. But I think just because, and I'm sorry, what Spiner? What's the first Brent, right? Yeah, Brett Spiner. So he just did such a good job of selling it. Like he's totally, he was kooky in the first one, and this one they definitely ramped it up to like 10, and his kind of bizarreness. And I was cool with that. And like I said, that was the only time I think I felt any emotion was him talking to his boyfriend. That, as far as I know, has been supporting him for 20 years in a coma. And like, it's just like, okay, you know what? That kind of got to me. But to your point, it was totally out of the blue. Like they didn't have to kill him. Like, and then it was kind of weird too, because by the end, it doesn't even feel like he doesn't care. Like he's just like, oh, these aliens are doing stuff now. So it kind of just feels totally glossed over. But that was about the only thing that I was like, at least they try to do something a little bit different, because everything else just was bad. So yeah. Oh, and there was an African warlord in it too, but I won't even get into that discussion. So,
yeah.
But yeah. So that was Independence Day Resurgence. I would say I would give this like, I don't know, a 1.5 out of 5. It's not good. There's some of the visual effects, especially like when the giant spaceship is kind of like coming over Earth. Like there's some nice effects that are in it, but there's just so much effects that it just doesn't land well, right? I think the first one, it did a lot more with less, and in this one they did a lot less with more. And I think that's why the first one will be more memorable. And even though it wasn't great, I don't think it's going to, ever have like a giant cult following of like, oh, this is just fantastic. It did enough for what it is. This one is just totally unmemorable and will be forgotten. And I actually can't believe that this was done in 2016. That's how long ago this movie came out. And I can't believe it's been 8 years since that happened, because I totally forgot about it.
well, I was going to say, because usually with movies like that, I mean, if one aspect fails, the other kind of shines. So like if the story is great, usually the special effects are going to be subpar, or vice versa, where the special effects are amazing but the story is like crap. Here it's like they're both bad in equal measures, right?
Yes.
Because I mean, because you would expect the CGI to kind of like lift it up, but it's like, I mean, you could tell, like, even for us who are like sophisticated film goers who are used to seeing like pretty good CGI, this was pretty bad, by modern standards. And obviously, to say that the story is crap is like saying, well, the sky is blue. I mean, it was disjointed, incoherent, and made absolutely no sense. And the fact that you tried out all these characters only to have them killed probably like a few scenes later, it's like, well, the actor who got that gig, is probably laughing all the way to the bank, because they had to do very minimal work, and they got paid a lot of money. I'll probably give it a 1.3 out of 5, because I watched this movie on Monday, and I totally forgot about it, and I had to rewatch it again because it was one of those movies where it was easily forgettable, right? I mean, there are some movies that even though they're bad, there are certain parts of it that I will still remember. Here, there was nothing about this movie that stuck out to me. What I find so jarring is the fact that they, not only do they try to pay homage to the original Independence Day movie, but but there are certain scenes that just make you think, oh, they're definitely doing a callback to that science fiction franchise. Well, it doesn't work because obviously, like that one scene where they're gearing up for the alien attack. Obviously, that was a nod to the intro to Empire Strikes Back, and if they thought that was going to be a saving grace, they were wrong because it did nothing to make me like this movie anymore. And also with the sentient the disembodied alien who's now the sentient AI. That's a callback to to all of those disembodied aliens we saw in Star Trek throughout the years. That obviously didn't gel very well also. So it's just one of those things where it's like they're trying to do too much, trying to appeal to every sci-fi fan and sensibility, and in the process they ended up pleasing nobody.
Yeah,
so
I agree. They really wanted to you to really enjoy those member berries, because all it was, I felt like I could just be like, oh, they did that in the first one, right? Like when Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum are captured by the alien and they're just like sitting there like goading them, like, peace, and then they're like like shooting off the rocket and everything, and then what happens in this one? Well, they kind of have the same thing, right? Where the pilots are in there and Liam Hemsworth's character is just like sitting there out in front trying to distract them while everyone jumps into planes or into the alien spaceships. I'm just like, ugh, like enough. Like, yes, it was in the first one. Like, just let the first one be. You managed to capture just enough magic in the first one, and then you totally shit all over it in the second one.
I mean, what's also sad about this too is the fact that they thought, because like I mentioned earlier, I mean, the first one ended on on a high note, so you kind of felt like that movie kind of concluded itself, right? Like, we had this movie, they told the story, it's done. Here, it's like, hey, I bet you guys can't wait to see more of us, and it's like, well, no, we don't want to see any more of you, man. Like, we don't care if you decide to take it into space and go to war with the Harvesters. We don't. Enough's enough.
Yes.
Just leave it alone.
Find out
man.
in the third one, there's an even bigger and badder alien queen that's in that one.
Oh, and there's another mothership that you failed to destroy in the first two movies that you got to destroy this time so that the threat will truly be over. And that's like, when does it end, dude? Like, well, I mean, it's also a chance to make some more jokes about Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum's character being motion sick, because apparently he doesn't like flying, and it's a miracle he didn't hurl when he was on the moon, but it's whatever. But go ahead and let us know down in the comments below what you think, if you really loved Independence Day Resurgence, and if you do, God help you. And we'll catch you on the next review. But thanks so much for watching, and take it easy.